I now recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gohmert, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I would like to correct the record, and no number of votes taken by the gallery will change the facts. But the gentleman from Tennessee did say he attributed that one of the three things Jefferson wished to be remembered by that was part of his memorial or gravestone was that he was the father of the Constitution. That was the gentleman's words. I didn't hear which two things he left out, but I'm a bit surprised, since all of us are not immune from having slips of the tongue, that the gentleman would be so contemptuous of Mr. Goodlatte, because the gentleman did say that a tribute to Jefferson as being father of the Constitution. He wasn't there. And I kind of like one of his suggestions when he wrote back and said, you know, if I'd been at the Constitution's writing, I would have liked to have seen a proposal that no law could be passed that had not been on file for a year. And I would suggest that might not be such a bad rule.
Gentleman to yield for a moment.
And I will not. The gentleman's had over 10 minutes, and I've had about 2.
Can I ask the chair to correct the point? I was not contemptuous of Mr. Goodlatte. I was expressing my fault in saying Mr. Goodlatte might have been right. I would not express
the chairman needs to get regular order going.
Well, if we're going to
attack, it's not enough to condemn Mr. Goodlatte or belittle him. It's
gentleman from Texas
stealing my time. In any event, let me go to what's panel 3 of the Jefferson Memorial. God, who gave us life, gave us liberty. Can the liberties of a nation be secure when we have removed a conviction that these liberties are the gift of God? Indeed, I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just and that his justice cannot sleep forever. He didn't use the word "and." I slipped that in. Now, Mr. Parshall, you indicated a similar belief. So let me ask Mr. Tebby, do you believe Jefferson and Mr. Parshall that when you threaten religious liberty that you actually are threatening civil liberties as well?
Yes, I believe that religious freedom is an important civil liberty. I think that's common ground among many of us here in this room today. What disturbs me slightly is the way the story has been told, though, of Riffer and Arlupa by some of my colleagues on the...
Well, that goes beyond the extent of my question. Thank you for wanting to get into that. Mr. Baylor, do you have a succinct answer to whether or not the threat to religious liberty threatens everyone's civil liberty?
Absolutely. As Chairman Frank said in his opening remarks, religious liberty is our first freedom, and it is the foundation on which all of our freedoms rest. It presupposes that there is a God and that we have a duty.
Well, and in the First Amendment, do you think one portion of the first 2 clauses is more important than the other?
I do not. I think that the framers of the First Amendment recognized the importance of all parts of the First Amendment. They had their own purpose.
But you understand the 2 parts I'm talking about, the first 2.
Are you referring to free exercise and establishments?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, they're both important to protecting liberty. And
is one more important than the other? Because it seems like the Supreme Court in more recent times has almost eliminated or prohibiting free exercise thereof. It seems like that's taken a second seat to this Supreme Court.
Well, obviously the Employment Division versus Smith case was a grave disappointment, and we're grateful that Congress responded with the Religious Freedom Restoration Act regarding, and they've interpreted correctly, I believe, in the Ocentro case, 8-0, the Hobby Lobby case, 5-4, a little bit closer. I would submit, if you're asking about this, that there are certain Establishment Clause cases, particularly in the 70s and the 80s, that were wrongly decided. And there are still some problems out there in Establishment Clause jurisprudence, but I think the Court has done some things to correct some of its prior errors from the 70s and the 80s.
Yeah. Ms. Wyndham, do you have thoughts about religious liberty and whether or not infringements on religious liberty are a real threat to civil liberty?
I believe they are a real threat to civil liberty. Religious liberty is a critical component of human dignity. It also promotes both diversity and peace in our large nation made up of many faiths.
Okay, thank you. My time's expired.